Hey everybody, this is Alex Weber and I'm on RichardMetalFan's show.
Hey, what's up, guys? Episode 375 of RichardMetalFan Interviews, calling from Zoom, and I'm here with the great
Wow.
Alex Weber. Plays with Exist. He also plays with now with Revocation, also with Malignancy, Evelyn, Acts and Scene, Empyrean Sanctum, Svengali, and Wait. That's quite a resume, man. So,
Making the rounds,
so
playing
how?
with everybody.
Yeah. So how are you doing today? It's great to be able to have you on.
I'm doing all right. Yeah, thanks, man. That's sick that you've done 375 episodes too, man. I didn't realize you'd been doing this for as long as you have.
Yeah, I've been doing it for a little over 5 years now.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
great.
Hell yeah. But it's great to be able to have
Well,
you
thanks for
here
having me. Of
anytime, man.
course.
Anytime. So, kind of the format of the show is I want to talk about like your musical history and sort of do a rundown of your discography, but take me back to young Alex Weber. So, growing up,
Okay.
what were the first bands that got you into metal? What made you want to slap at a bass?
Well, being 36 years old, I was like a preteen, like when new metal was really a thing, like really popping off in the early thousands. So the first real like influence I had, at least for my bass playing, was Ryan Martini from Mudvayne. Like
Dude,
so
Berber
many other
Dang.
bass players. Like so many other bass players my age, Ryan was kind of the first dude
Yeah,
to
I think he's
really.
super underrated too.
Really? I mean, I don't think he's underrated at all. I think if you listen to metal, you know him. I mean,
Yeah.
sure, he's not as you know, lauded as John Paul Jones or John Entwistle or any of the or James Jamerson or any of the people you see that people comment on bass player forums about. Sure, he's not on Les Claypool, he's not on that level, but he is like one rung down on the ladder from that. I still think most people know who he is, and either way, he was really big for me. Um, so Mudvayne definitely was a kind of the very beginning. When I first started playing bass, I had been listening to, like pop punk and like kind of like sort of punk, not like really like true punk. If I said the punk bands that I'd listened to, punk heads would probably
Yeah.
make fun of me. But like listening to like Rancid and Green Day and Less Than Jake and stuff like that,
Yeah.
who all actually have really good bass players.
Yeah, Mike
Um,
Dirnt's the great one. Like he has those great bass lines. I gotta also put Mark Hoppus from Blink 182 up there.
Sure. Yeah. But yeah, I mean, Roger from Less Than Jake, his bass lines were super melodic. And, Matt Freeman, the first gnarly thing I ever heard on bass was the bass solo of Maxwell Murder. Um, that was the first thing that kind of made my jaw drop and be like, holy crap, like that's possible? Like what? But, listening to all three of those guys was really impactful for me in the beginning because most of their bass lines are incredibly melodic, and it kind of set the standard for me for wanting to write bass lines that don't just fill in the bottom end, don't just, be the pillow for the rest of the band to sit on. A lot of those dudes wrote bass lines that were integral melodic elements of the tune. I mean, the first bass line I ever learned was Longview by Green Day. And if you don't know that song, like the main
Yeah,
melody of that song is
the
the
do
bass
do
part.
do 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 do. That
Exactly.
it's just
So like
really
that was
memorable.
totally, yeah. And same thing with like Roger from Less Than Jake, all listening to these dudes play these bass lines that were really upfront in the mix and were really doing something melodically interesting, really kind of set the tone for the rest of my career. Even though it wasn't metal, listening to those guys really kind of put it into my head that the bass could be more than just the foundation of the band. And then so when I started getting into heavier musics, it only made sense that I really gravitated towards Ryan because he kind of would do the same thing. Um, and so from new metal, and I liked System of a Down and Slipknot too, like stuff like that, like all of the big new metal bands
Yeah,
of
me
that
too.
period of time. I liked. And a lot of that stuff is still good. Like Iowa is still an angry
Yeah.
record. Like
Like
that
it was
record,
more death metal. Like there's that riff in I Am Hated that sounds like dun 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 dun. That sounds like a death metal riff.
some of that stuff is still super heavy. Um, but that was kind of the beginning. But then the entryway into underground metal or real metal or whatever people want to call it was death. That one of my friends at the time who like in like middle like early middle high school, he uh he was the dude that was sort of responsible in getting me into a lot of bands. So like I'm an only child. I didn't have any older brothers to like, get me into music. So I had to rely on my friends, and both of my parents were professional musicians, but they did like classical music and musical theater and stuff like that. So I wasn't getting any metal records from them.
Yeah.
Um, but so I had a friend who was think he was like 4 years older than me or something. So he was like a senior and I was a freshman. So he was sort of like an older brother to me in that he would send me all of these bands. So I found out about Death, Nile, Morbid Angel, Hate Eternal, a bunch of, he was also into like heavy metal. So like Sabotage and, but just a bunch of stuff. So I remember there was one day he came over with Sound of Perseverance, and Halloween, the Keeper of the Seven Keys. And he brought, and maybe one more, but I can't, and maybe it was like a Dragon Force record or something. I don't know. But he showed me those, and hearing Flesh and the Power It Holds for the first time was
Oh,
again one of those like opening moments where I was like, dude, what is this? Like, this
yeah.
is crazy.
Yeah.
Um, and that's kind of what began me going down the infinite rabbit hole of of metal.
Yeah. And I was like doing my research on metal archives. I believe one of your first bands, if not your first band, was Wisteria. Like, tell me about that. Like, nobody ever
Mhm.
talks about them.
Oh, well, yeah, because we didn't really like record that much. We only did a couple of EPs and never really. So we were active during like the MySpace days. So people, were still sharing music and streaming it in some capacity, but it was before YouTube. It was before any of the streaming apps. Really before any of that. And we never really broke out into the greater musical world at that point. And also around that same time, I was joining Exist, so I was kind of
Yep.
starting to do that and sort of moving in that direction. But yeah, Wisteria was a kind of a prog progressive death metal band. Opeth and Death were really big influences on our music, and we recorded a couple of EPs that I don't think. I mean, I think MySpace technically still works. Like, I think you can go on the website, but I don't know if any
Yeah.
of like the pictures or the music still work. But either way, yeah, that was like the first um serious band that I was in, that I joined in high school and then kind of played until basically college, and then Exist sort of took over.
Yeah. And then how did you end up hooking up with Exist? Because I believe you joined in 2010.
No, I actually joined in like 2007 or something. 2010 is when we released that first EP in Mirrors. Um, but no, I met Max because so I grew up in Gaithersburg, Maryland, and he grew up in Frederick, and both of those are like they're like 20 minutes apart from each other. And Gaithersburg is more like suburban wasteland. There like wasn't really much happening there. It's not like it's not an artsy city or anything, but it's more suburbs rather than Frederick had like a kind of old town downtown area, and there was just more art and music happening. So I found myself going up there a lot for shows, just like local shows and parties and hangs and whatever. And I remember meeting him one day at this I don't even want to call it a venue because it was like out behind this dude's house, and the venue itself was a garage that was like a separate garage from the guy's house that he had padded the walls with mattresses and blankets, and you had to like to get into the room you had to like crawl through this like weird glory hole thing, and it was like hot and sweaty and
What?
disgusting. it was
Ugh.
it was a very very weird um venue.
Yeah, that's
And
very DIY.
Super DIY. Yeah, yeah. So I went up to that show with one of my friends because he knew somebody else that was playing on it. And when I get there, I see somebody wearing a Morbid Angel shirt. I think that's what he was wearing. Or either way, it was a death metal band. And so obviously I'm gonna gravitate towards that. And then I started talking to him, and that's where I met him. Um, and they had already actually, and Anoop Sastry was there too, because at the time Max and Anoop had a band together, so they were there hanging at the show. Um, but and that was like maybe 2007 or something. And it wasn't until about a year later when um, Exist. So originally, Exist was called Asriel. When I met Max, he was starting Asriel, and he started that with Alex Rudinger.
Yeah. Now
And
currently
so
killing it with
him,
Trivium.
I know I'm really glad he's out there touring again. Um, but yeah, it started with Rudy, and then they got this other dude that they had recorded a first album with, but he just didn't really work out, and things weren't really happening. So they kicked him out and brought me in. And so I almost re-recorded that first album. Like there's a first Exist album that's even before that EP that we never really released and kind of don't talk about. Not because it's like
Yes.
terrible, but just because it's more like straight up death metal and kind of doesn't really
Kind of
uh,
fit.
it doesn't showcase where the band went after that, because it really kind of changed into a more progressive sort of thing when we did that EP. But either way, it was back then, and we did the typical thing of opening up for a lot of different shows. Like even Wisteria did this too. Like between Wisteria and Exist, I opened up for like Gojira at a smaller club when they
Oh
were
wow.
still. It was, yeah, it was crazy. It's like a club that was maybe. Where do you live? Again, you don't live in Maryland, right?
No, I live like northwest of Atlanta, Georgia, near Dallas.
Oh, okay, cool. Because I remember meeting you at some point, but I don't remember where I've met you. But either way, there was a venue in Virginia called Jack's that was maybe a like 300 capacity room, 350, something like that. It wasn't a very big venue, but it was like the venue that everybody played at for tours of that size coming through the area. And so yeah, like opening up for Gojira, for Nile, for Devin Townsend, Candlemass, Sonata Arctica, like a ton of different bands
Wow.
that, we we just got on these shows because we were like a good band, and we just ended up doing that a lot. Um, so it was cool to really get to experience that on a regular basis.
Yeah. And then tell me about like the first full-length album, Sunlight. Like what was sort of like the thought process being that was sort of like the debut full-length Exist album?
Um, what do you mean by thought process
Sort
with
of like
that?
the whole writing and recording of it.
Oh, well, so with that album, we had been writing that music for quite a while because back then, it was like early college, so we still kind of had a little bit more time on our hands, and we could actually get together and rehearse regularly. Like we had practices every week, pretty much, and some of that music, the way that it was written, it was really kind of cool because it was this very organic thing that would change over the weeks, as we'd play it or we'd play a gig and something new would happen. And there was sort of an improvisational nature to how some stuff came about, which was cool because that is something that we were really trying to uh, put into the music. In high school, started getting into fusion, and that led me into jazz. So, things like Weather Report and Alan Holdsworth and stuff like that were the entryway into me getting into jazz. And then when
Yeah.
I went to college for jazz. So I studied jazz bass.
Love some jazz
And
too.
what's say again?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Have you heard of this artist called Mark Seals?
Mark Steele? No, I haven't.
Yeah, he's sort of a jazz. He has this song called Highway Blues. If you ever had like Windows XP, that song came like default with it. And
Okay,
that's
here I'm
just
a
one song I loved when I was a kid. It's just very
okay.
moody.
Mark Seals, interesting. Um, so yeah, um had been getting into that. And then when I met Max, that was another connecting point because he had started, really getting into fusion, especially Alan Holdsworth too. Like he was really big into that, um, as a lot of metal guitar players can be. And so yeah, we were trying to incorporate all that stuff into the music, and we'd have solo sections and whatever. So the way that that music developed um, was really cool, and it hasn't. We just haven't really had the chance to do that since because we all started working full time, and then the drummer on that first album on Sunlight, Matt Kleiss, he kind of just drifted away and didn't really play with us anymore. So that's when we had to start getting these other drummers and not having a full band in the area anymore. Obviously, that changes the dynamic of being able to play together and have the music develop in that way. Um, but when we were recording that, we didn't really know what we were doing either. I mean, like Matt Kleiss had like started getting into understanding recording, and home recording technology was still kind of in its infancy. So there were things that people had and things that you could do, but it wasn't like it is now, where like everything is super high tech. You can get really good interfaces for fairly cheap. There's videos on YouTube for just about recording anything. Um, so we didn't really have much of that, and trying to record all of that stuff on our own came with some challenges, but it was kind of fun to have to figure that out and do that. And it came with doing some kind of experimental things too. Like I have a lot of really cool memories of things that we would do on that album, like for soundscaping, especially like, dropping nuts and bolts on the like concrete floor of his basement, recording that, and then like putting it in reverse to create all these different textures, like going out, getting in the car with a hand recorder and recording the Doppler effect of like the cars coming by. Um, doing a bunch of stuff like that that we then would mix into the music. And kind of it was a fun process getting to do that because we just had the time to experiment with different things.
Yeah, yeah. Then of course, flash forward a couple years, you started playing, I guess, locally around Maryland, and then you got signed to Prosthetic Records. So how did they
Mm.
find Exist?
Well, so we had been contacting a bunch of people when we were gonna release Sunlight. So right before we released Sunlight, I did a tour with Jeff Loomis playing for his solo project, and that was the first tour I ever did. And so in doing that tour, I met this guy named Steve Joe, who is a big dude in the metal scene. And at the time, he was working with Century Media because Jeff was, I think his solo projects were on Century Media. So I met Steve. He was really cool. We hit it off. And then when we were going to release Sunlight, I had emailed Steve. I didn't think Century Media was going to be interested in it because at the time they were just kind of doing more like straight ahead metal stuff, and they were a bigger label. So I just didn't think it was going to go anywhere, but I still emailed him anyway. And he told me basically that, it's like they weren't really trying to put money into developing newer bands. And I think that was right before they were about to get bought by Sony too. So I think that could have also played into that. But either way, like Steve liked the music, and he's like, yeah, this is really cool. I like this, but it's just not really going to work with Century Media. And so then we, at the same time, had also emailed Michael Berberian at Season of Mist, and he responded back to us like right after we decided to self-release it. Because we had emailed him and we hadn't really heard back, so we just assumed that just nothing was going to happen. And since all of the leads that we were going after weren't working, we're just like, all right, fuck it, we're just going to self-release it. just
Yeah.
we'll deal with it. It'll be fine. It's still gonna get some traction, whatever. And then Michael responded to us like a week later or something like that. And so, um, because he was interested in the album, but because we had self-released it, it just didn't seem like it was gonna be a thing. And so that we like just missed the boat on that, which was kind of a bummer because I really like Season of Mist and they've got a great roster of bands. But when we got to doing So True, So Bound, I don't remember how uh I got in touch with Steve again, but Steve had started working at Prosthetic. He had left Century Media and started working at Prosthetic. And we started talking to him again, and he was, actually interested in working with us and developing the band and putting effort into it, because sometimes you'll get labels that will sign you, but then might not really do much for you. They might not be really that interested in pushing you more than just like releasing the album and then that's kind of it. But Steve was really interested in actually working with us and was kind of hooking us up. And he obviously had the connections that he did. So that um, was another bonus. 'Cause I think Steve's actually at Metal Blade now. So he's like moving around to a bunch of different places and really still an active part of the scene. But um, we got on prosthetic because of that. And then that turned out to be really good for us because once we got on prosthetic, we were able to get onto tours easier.
Yeah.
Because before that, um, we had been friends, well, still are, but friends with Intronaut and friends with Obscura. And both of those bands had been trying to take us out on some of their tours before that. But whenever either an offer would go out or they would try to put our name into the pile, we wouldn't get the offer because we just weren't big enough and we weren't signed and whatever. But it seemed like right when we signed with Prosthetic, then we were able to actually get um, on tours. Like not too long after that, we toured with Gorguts, and that was the first tour Exist ever did.
Yeah. What was
Um,
that like?
it was awesome. So it's funny how chains of events lead you into different places and kind of, shape what happens to you. But that tour, it was originally supposed to be Gorguts, Defeated Sanity, and Exist. And so on that tour, Defeated Sanity was going to be playing Dharmata. And so that was another reason why that tour happened because it was a little bit more of a proggy kind of weird sort of thing. So it fit the bill. But I don't remember what happened with Defeated, but they had to drop off the tour, and that really sucked for them. It sucks dropping off a tour in any capacity, but especially when you're doing something that is not like a typical thing, because trying to then set that up again can be sometimes a little bit of a hassle. But either way, it ended up just being Gorguts and Exist, and for a touring package, that's not like that great because at the time we were totally an unknown band. And sure, Gorguts is awesome, but if you have other tour packages happening at the same time that have three or four other really known bands, that can, influence somebody's decision to go to a show. But it was the show still turned out really good, and the dudes in Gorguts are like the coolest people ever. Like Luke really made that tour an awesome thing for us. Like he was super generous, just really treated us like equals. Like there was no sense of hierarchy or competition. It's like everybody were just hanging playing music. It's great. Um, so that was kind of perfect for us. I mean, you couldn't have really asked for a better first tour. Um, but so because Defeated dropped off of that tour,
Yeah. Did you play like a
they
longer set?
well, no, I think we still played the same amount of time, but because they dropped off of that tour and they still wanted to do the Dharmata tour or Dharmata music, they got on another tour. I guess was it? No, it wasn't that year. Maybe it was like the next year after that. It was one of the bloodletting tours with Origin, Archspire, uh, maybe I know the Kennedy Vale was on it because that's where I met Gabe Sieber the first time. I think Visceral Disgorge was on it. Either way, like at one of those like festival tours, and Defeated played on that. Gonna do Dharmata, but Jacob, their bass player, had just moved over to the West Coast from Germany like a couple of weeks before that, and his work permit wasn't totally finalized. So, because those meetings can be notoriously sketchy and they can get canceled last minute or moved or whatever, they brought me in to fill in for them for the first 2 weeks of the tour in case Jacob's meeting got pushed back, which it did. So it's good that they brought me in. But so I got to play with Defeated for those first 2 weeks of that tour. And that wouldn't have happened if they had been on that tour with us and Gorguts because they would have played it and then that would have been it. So, um, you know, it's interesting how things can move around like that, and you end up getting offers for other stuff, or things come together because of something that gets canceled, or you just happen to be in the right place at the right time and know somebody and whatever. Um, but uh, but yeah,
Yeah. 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 And then, of course, 2018, I believe you got hooked up with Brody, our boy Brody, who lives in my area. So
uh-huh,
how do
yep.
you end up joining?
He, I think he had just been liking stuff that Exist was doing. Like Max had found him online, um, and he saw that Brody was like liking a bunch of our stuff. I don't think Brody did any like covers or anything of any of our music, but either way, Max ended up seeing some of his playing, and obviously he's a great drummer. So we started talking to him, and with him being younger and really trying to get out there and really hungry to do something, it's like, all right, this is kind of the perfect dude to be talking to for this. And he also liked a lot of the same types of musics that we listen to. Like he's a really big Rush fan, so that's obviously, was kind of a connecting point for some of the progressive elements of the music. Meshuggah is a big thing for him too. Um, so there, it just seemed like the right move. And then Brody's, been recording with us for since then.
Nice.
Yeah,
So
so it's
then,
basically just the internet. Like the internet is been pretty uh integral for even for me too for getting the different gigs and offers that I've gotten just through the videos that I've posted, through people I've met online. Like almost every tour I've gotten has come from me making some kind of video or having some kind of presence online, you know.
right.
So,
And then flash forward to 2019, you put out that first EP with Wait. We Are in Transit with you and Max, and of course with Charlie. So how'd
yeah.
that project come to be?
Well, Charlie, we had known for a long time. We met Charlie actually back in Mirrors days, because he went to this college in Maryland called McDaniel. That it's it's like a private liberal arts college. But Matt Kleiss, the drummer at the time, he had gone there, and Max, I think, took a couple semesters there, but then just then dropped out because of Cynic and DTA really starting to tour. Um, but Charlie was going to McDaniel, I think, around the same time that Matt Kleiss was. And so we met him through that, and he at the time had been starting to write and demo out some music that he had been working on. So I remember being at one of Matt Kleiss's, like one of the houses that he lived in, with his roommate, and I remember Charlie showing up with like burned CDs of some of these demos of stuff that he had made, and so we had known him since then, and I don't remember when we started working on that music. But yeah, it might have been like around like 2017 or something. We started like really actually putting that music together, and even some of the stuff we were writing at that time ended up being on the full length, which came out a couple years later. But it was just something that Charlie was trying to put together, and at the time, Exist had another guitarist, so it's not like we were trying to, get Charlie to join Exist. We were kind of off doing our thing and he was doing his thing. And because he knew us and because the musics were similar enough, it's like, all right, you guys would be kind of the perfect fit for that band. So
Yeah.
it, ended up just coming together pretty organically because of that.
Cool. And I know you also do some session work because I know in early 2020, the Wormhole album, The Weakest Among Us, came out, and you
Hmm.
know you handled the session bass on that. So how did you end up playing bass on that album?
Sort of again, like I was saying earlier, with certain things leading you in different places and you getting other offers because you end up somewhere. Like I got that offer from them and met them because of playing with Defeated Sanity. On that tour that we did, we played somewhere in DC and Sanjay and Basil came out. And this was before Basil was like even in the band. At least I'm pretty sure Basil was there. Um, but I met Sanjay and then he hit me up not too long after that and did the album.
Nice. Nice. And then I know, no, that same year, 2020, I know you're kind of busy because I know you did the Next Exist album, Egoista, probably butchered
Hmm.
that. Then you joined up with
No, that was
Sven.
actually correct.
Then you did, oh, nice. Then you did
Yeah.
Svengali, Nightmares of Our Own Design. Then you also joined Malignancy in 2020. So how was that year for you?
Well, I mean, like everybody else, that was a pretty chaotic year of uncertainty. Um, so I mean, we just didn't know what was going to happen.
Yeah,
We didn't
just got to
know
keep
how
busy.
long things were. And luckily for me, um, you know, so all of my gigs disappeared that year. I play full time and I usually play, somewhere between 150 and 200 gigs a year. And that year I played maybe 30 gigs, and half of that was from an Exist tour that happened right before the pandemic. So like I went to basically not playing at all. Um, but I had all these other projects that I could get to. Like with Svengali, that's a side project of mine that I have had for a little while. And with the other bands that I play in, with doing the sideman work that I do, it can be kind of challenging to make time to keep up with that, So like before, with being a full-time musician back home, that took up a lot of time. And then joining Obscura, touring with them, to now touring with Revocation, like the time can go out the window pretty easily if you're traveling around a lot or if you have a busy playing schedule. But that year, obviously I didn't have shit. So that really kind of helped get that project off of the ground. And then Malignancy, Ronnie hit me up like kind of right before the pandemic started. And, obviously I couldn't do anything with them until the beginning of 2021. But, I started learning all the music then. I had to transcribe all of that stuff too, which was very challenging. And it was nice to have the extra time that I did for that because, he didn't have tabs for anything. He had some bass stems for some of it, but a lot of it I had to just sit with the recordings and just listen over and over and over and over and over again and just try to figure it out. Um, so yeah, it was kind of wild that like, even though that was a pretty terrible year in a lot of different regards. Like I'd had a lot of stuff happen for me. Like I sold 10 bases that year because a lot of people had like, stimulus checks that they were trying to blow on something. So I'd like sold a bunch of the bases that I build. Um, and did a couple of other recording sessions and just different things like that. So there was seemingly a lot happening that year.
Right. That's cool. And then going into 2022, you did the next Wait album, The End of Noise. I thought that was a pretty
Hmm.
good full length. So how was that like making the full length versus like the first EP?
I mean, it was kind of the same process for me. I mean, I didn't write any of that music, so I just kind of came in at the end and did my bass parts. And yeah, I mean, it wasn't really that different of a process at all. I still kind of had the same sort of freedom that I do with writing my bass parts. So it felt like recording an Exist record, and then that's another reason why we ended up just getting Charlie to join Exist when our last guitarist Matt left. Um, because musically both of those bands are very similar in a way. Um, and working with him with the weight music, it felt good, felt easy. So it's like it's kind of the obvious choice of who we're gonna get to replace him.
And cool. And then next up, last year you did the last Exist album, Hijacking the Zeitgeist. I thought that was a
Hmm.
pretty, still so far one of my favorite albums from last year. So what was sort of like the
Yep.
writing and recording process like for that, and how has like the feedback been?
Well, I mean, the some of that music had been written during the pandemic, and that came together a little bit more collaboratively. Like there's the title track, some of the main riffs in that were written by me, and like I had given them to Max, and he kind of would write the whole song to that. Um, and that was a lot of that stuff was coming together when the pandemic was kind of opening up again, so we we're kind of bummed that when we released Egoista, we weren't able to tour on it at all, because we had been on schedule to release that album during the summer, before COVID happened. And when you're on a release schedule like that, you can't really change it. So then when that happened, it's like, dude, like, fuck, this really kind of sucks because we can't do anything with this. We can't go out and tour. We can sure make content online, but it's just kind of a different thing. And everybody's, head is elsewhere because the world seems like it's fucking ending. And it was kind of a bummer to be able to or not be able to tour on that and not be able to really do much of anything. So when the world was kind of opening back up again, it sort of invigorated the energy in us again. It's like, all right, well, we got to come back really swinging with this because we got to come back and play some shows. And now that uh, the world is not over, we can still you know release something and get out there and still really go for it. And I think that ended up um, putting some serious energy behind the music because that's definitely one of my favorite Exist records so far.
Nice. And being as it has been a year now, have you started working on the next Exist album?
Oh yeah, we're releasing an EP in a couple of months.
Oh, nice. Nice. That sort of like
Yeah,
a
yeah.
set,
So
is that a segue to the to follow up up the hijacking the zeitgeist, or is that going to be like something completely different that Exist hasn't done before?
no, I mean it's like one of the reasons why we're doing it is Hijacking was the last album we had on our contract for Prosthetic Records. And so we didn't re-sign with them, and we're gonna release this EP independently, and we're gonna try to see how that goes for us. Um, to release, uh, we're gonna do this EP, maybe even another one after that. And because EPs are obviously shorter, less recording, less money involved, and everything, it makes it a little bit of safer move with doing something independently, because releasing anything costs a lot of money. Like, I don't know if you follow Archspire at all, but
Yeah,
like
I love them. I've
in,
interviewed them before. They're hilarious.
yeah, yeah, they definitely are. That, like, I'm sure you saw then something that they posted within the last year or so, kind of talking about all the different expenses that go into. releasing an album. And it can be a lot of money. I mean, obviously Archspire is on a very different level than Exist is, but it still doesn't come with a small price tag, you know. So doing something that we can still kind of recoup our losses from and sort of keep the machine rolling is we're going to try um definitely this EP. Who knows what will happen after that? I mean, where the EP is done and recorded, and we're going to start rolling out songs. I guess maybe like pretty soon, I think in like January or February or something. I don't know when we're gonna start making announcements for it, but that's gonna be a thing. And then we'll see what happens after that. We have some ideas for different things that we could do with Exist, but the EP that's coming up, it's typical Exist form, kind of. It's I don't think we're reinventing the sound of the band at all, but the tunes are good. I like them, and we got some cool guest artists on it.
Cool. I'm looking forward to that. And then, of course,
Yeah,
of course, also last year you did the Mon Destructen bite with
yeah.
Evelyn. So tell me about that. How'd you end up getting involved with that band?
I met Anthony. I don't know, man, online. I don't remember where I met Anthony, but we he had hit me up a couple years ago, and I think that was another album I did during the pandemic. Um, he hit me up and asked if I'd be interested in it, and after hearing the music, it was very uh unique and was a really interesting process of writing my bass parts for it because of how dense and dissonant the music is. That you get a lot of these bands in a lot of different styles. I mean, even in brutal death metal, this can happen, but especially like in progressive metal, where a lot of the uh music is very tonal. Like for instance, Obscura, and I'm not saying anything negative with this, but a lot of Obscura's music is very tonal, and the bass parts kind of can write themselves in some way because it's like, all right, this is more consonant sounding music, so I'm not gonna place notes that are really outside of this chord. Sure, I can have certain note choices that I'll pick, but the music kind of writes itself in some ways. Um, and that's totally fine. I mean, I love playing more consonant inside music too, but with Evelyn, it was really interesting because the music was so dissonant and dense that pretty early on, I found out that there were a lot of these riffs that I could literally play any note on and it would have its own unique character to it. That like there was some of these riffs that like I would go through and like try literally playing each of the chromatic notes on it. I'm like, "Oh, that's actually kind of cool. Oh, that's cool too. Like what the fuck? This is crazy that it was a unique experience for me because I haven't gotten to write much music that was that open-ended in a way. And so the way that I ended up kind of going about writing a lot of my bass parts is I would just be listening to these riffs and then I would just start singing something that I would like whatever would pop up in my head, however my ear would kind of attach to that, that was like my starting point. And then I would sort of write based on that rather than writing based on thinking. It was all just like what my ear is telling me because everything else is so dense and atonal and just not really being anything harmonically obvious in that regard that I kind of just had to solely go off of my ear. And it was a really fun writing process for that because some of the bass lines I came up with were really interesting to me and how they came about was a unique experience. So definitely fun. And he's got a whole new album worth of music that he's done with and we'll record it at some point, you know.
Cool. And then, of course, this year we got you got three new albums with some new bands. So the first one I want to talk about is, of course, with Acts of Scene with Archeron, of course, working with the great George Colias and, of course, with Max as well. So how did that band come to be?
he had hit Max up about doing it a while ago. So for one, that album had been sitting on the shelf for a long time. Like I recorded that back in, it might have even been before the pandemic. It might have been in like 2018 or something. Um, yeah, this dude, I think he lives in Brazil. His name's Romulo. He was sort of involved in that album, and he's the one that hit me up about it. And they had gotten George, and there was another guitarist on it that I can't remember what his name is now, but it was sort of like Romulo and this guy's band. And so they hit uh, George up first, I think. Got George to record, then they hit up Max, obviously because of the Death to All connection and how this music is very like influenced by that kind of sound. And I guess they also needed a bass player. I don't know if they had talked to anybody else about doing it, but they needed a bass player, and Max obviously threw my name in for that and got um, hooked up that way. And again, I mean, I feel like I've been very lucky in that a lot of the session work that I've done, people kind of give me free reign to do whatever I want,
Nice, because
you know,
nice.
and I
Yeah. All right.
go for it.
Hey, yeah, because I know you play with so many different bands, Alex. Like it's crazy. Like I mentioned in the before. Like how do you like what sort of yeah, like if you have like a different frame depending on the projects, or do you just bring in like your own kind of like style depending on the project?
It's more of that. I mean, so like like I said a few minutes ago, I freelance for a living. Like I'm like in a couple hours, that gig that I was telling you about, I'm going to play like a holiday party at a country club. Like playing like pop music and Christmas tunes and shit like that. So I play full time for a living, and I have to play lots of different styles of music. So I'm kind of just used to switching the gears of like, okay, now I got to go play a country gig, or now I'm playing a jazz gig, or now I got to go play a metal tour for like a month. I'm just kind of used to having to do that in a way, or it's at least set the tone for when I get offered these different projects. It doesn't feel like a dramatically different thing. I kind of just feel like I'm being myself in all of them. Obviously, I'm not going to show up to a jazz gig with a six-string fretless bass and a distortion pedal and, fucking headbang on stage. Obviously, I'm not going to be doing that. But I know how to play to the gigs, but I'm still showing up and kind of just being myself in a way, and fitting into whatever music I'm playing in, the best way that I possibly can. Um, so, um, so yeah, I mean, yeah, it just makes doing that stuff easier because that's been sort of just, I've been a professional musician for the last 12 or 13 years now. So I've just been kind of just used to having to do that sort of thing.
Cool. Cool. And then also, so this year you also joined up with the Empyrean Sanctum. I mean, you did
Yep.
their Detachment from Reality, the album. Like, tell me about that. Of course, working with the great Hannes Grossman, one of the best drummers of all time, in my opinion. Like, what was that like working with him?
Well, I didn't really have much direct connection with him, and it was kind of even the same thing with "So True, So Bound" because that's the second record that I'm on with Hannes. That Hannes was the drummer on "So True, So Bound," the Exist record, and so with "So True, So Bound," I had a little bit more direct connection to him because we were talking about like writing drum parts and whatever. But with Empyrean Sanctum, I didn't talk to him about it at all. It's like he had already recorded his parts. I got them sent by Justin. I recorded my stuff, and that's it. A lot of times with some of these projects like that, it can go that way. It's like, sure, like I'm on a record with George Callias and Hannes, but I never talked to George throughout that whole process. And I didn't really have any connection with Hannes on the Empyrean Sanctum record either. So sometimes it's just like you do your thing and then you send it off and that's it. Um, but again, it was a project that came about through meeting other people because of other gigs I had, and the main guy, Justin, I don't remember where I met him. He's a Chicago guy. Um, and yeah, hit me up and did it, and then that was it.
Cool. And then last but certainly not least, I want to talk about new Revocation album, New Gods, New
Hey, there you
Masters.
go.
I love
There
this
you go.
album. It's fucking badass album. So, how did you get to meet Dave Davidson and the boys?
So that was a longer thing in the making that I met Brett first. Um, and I don't remember exactly when that was. It might have been probably before the pandemic. It was like when I started kind of putting more videos up online and getting a little bit more attention because I was gonna like join the Faceless at one point, and then I ended up turning that down, and that got me some attention online. Um, and so maybe it was through that, maybe through playing for Defeated Sanity. I don't remember, but I met Brett first. Um, Somehow, and then saw them a couple of times because I didn't really get into Revocation until 2018, until the Outer Ones came out. That Revocation had always been a band I had heard of, but sometimes there's just groups that you just don't end up getting around to listening to because there's just so much music happening, and you just don't get to it. And so I hadn't really listened to them that much until 2018. And when the Outer Ones came out, that completely blew me away. Like it now the Outer Ones is like top five records for me,
I
of all
agree.
time. Um, and and I remember the moment that I heard it the first time that it was on the tour that Exist did with Obscura,
Yeah.
and we were driving through the desert, and Brody was like, "Oh, hey, you know that band Revocation? They just put out a new album. It's pretty fucking sick. You want to listen to it?" And we put it on while we were driving. And I'm sitting here driving, and this is in the middle of like a massive drive through the desert. I think that time I drove for 11 hours straight,
Holy
just kind of like
shit.
myself. And so I'm on like hour five of this like 11-hour drive. So I'm kind of in this like,
Zone.
zombie state.
Yeah.
And he puts this record on, and immediately I'm like, the fuck is this? Like, how have I never like checked this band out? Like, what the hell is going on? This is crazy. Um, like I'm sitting there laughing while I'm driving, like, oh my God, this is so good. Like, what the fuck is going on? And so I really started getting into them from there, and then went through the back catalog, really got into Great As Our Sin and Teratogenesis and Deathless, and either way, started really getting into that music. And I met Brett. Then I made a playthrough video for Of Unworldly Origin just to do it, just because it was fun. And Dave saw that one and was like really blown away from what I added to the music. But Brett was a really integral part of that band. Like he did a lot of the business stuff. Um, like he's working for Archspire now.
Oh
Um,
wow.
but yeah, yeah. But so he was like really integral to a lot of the business with the Revocation. So I just figured that I was never going to get to play in that band because I just figured with how that operation seemed like it was going that Brett was just never going to leave. So I was like, all right, well, that would have been cool, but I guess it's just not happening. Whatever. Can't play with every band.
Yeah.
Um, and so then Brett, I don't know exactly what happened. I mean, I know he's got some other kind of contracting job back home that I guess he just didn't want to tour much for anymore. But I kind of felt it coming a little bit. Like I sort of saw the writing on the wall a little bit. And then how it came about was surprising, though, that I got a message from Dave last, this was like August or something. You're like, hey man, I know this is a little crazy, but can you play a festival this weekend? Like I was doing a little short run with Exist and Pohawk, and I was sitting at the merch table, while one of the bands were playing, and then I got this message. It was a Saturday. The festival was next Saturday. So he's like, hey, I know this is, maybe not possible, but if you're down, like we got a festival, this Metal Injection Festival in New York. Um, Next Saturday, and we'd love to have you play on it. And so, I had a feeling there was going to be other offers from them that would continue to come through, but still, you don't want to just count on that. You just don't know what's going to happen. So even though it's kind of crazy, I'm like, all right, fuck this. Yeah, I'm doing it. Um, and so I had to learn the set that we played, which was, a shorter one. It was maybe only like 7 or 8 songs, but I had to learn that whole set in like a day and a half and then go up and start rehearsing with them to play that festival. And luckily with some of the tunes I had, already like orally had them in my head. Like we played Unworldly Origin, we played Godforsaken, stuff that like I had listened to a lot and had, sort of memorized by listening to it, but obviously not playing it before that. It's a different thing. And so that made it a little bit easier, but still it was kind of gnarly to have to grind that stuff out that quickly. And then so after that gig, Dave was like, "Hey, so I know that was crazy, but I got something even crazier for you. We have a new album coming out that I would love for you to be on. I mean, you've got the gig regardless if you say yes or no on this, but we'd love to have you on this album, but you got to record it like right now because Dave had already recorded bass parts for the whole thing
Yeah.
and they were on schedule to have Jens Bogren mix it like a week and a half from that point. And so he's like, "Hey, I know this is really crazy, so it's, don't feel pressured to say yes, but I didn't want to join a band and then be on a touring cycle for 2 or 3 years and then still not be on an album. So it was like, all right, this is going to be even crazier, but I kind of have to do this."
No pressure or
Um,
nothing.
well, no, no, and it was legitimately no pressure. Like he was totally fine with it. I put the pressure on myself because it was like, I want to be on this record. I don't want
Yeah,
to
so you had to
be
like play really
touring with this
fast.
band.
You had to like play blah, blah, blah.
Well, so, luckily, Dave had recorded the bass parts well, and he sent me the DIs for everything, so I was able to transcribe it. But like I just said, he didn't have tabs for it, so I had to transcribe everything. And so I had to transcribe all of his parts, kind of put my own thing on it, and then record all of it in like a week and a half or something. Um, and then they sent it off to Jens, and that was it. And then that's the album. But it was definitely a trial by fire in the beginning with having to like do everything as quickly as I did, you
Yeah.
know.
Yeah. Yeah, and of course, talking about like your approach to bass, I know you've heard your fair share of bass player jokes and memes and stuff, but I feel like you don't gravitate towards like flashy bass playing, but I feel like you find ways to link what the guitars are doing with the melody and what the drums are doing to the rhythm. Now, of course, with playing with like Revocation exists and so many other projects, like what's like your approach to like tracking bass?
It's gonna be dependent on the band. It's dependent on the project, the feeling that I get from it, because there's certain places that certain approaches can work or cannot work. Like for instance, one of my favorite bass players of all time, that guy on the poster back there, Scott LaFaro, who was the bass player for the great Bill Evans, really great jazz pianist back in, I mean, he died in the 80s, but like Scott played with him in the late 50s and early 60s. And Scott, his playing was very soloistic in a way where he would like his bass lines were not just like walking quarter notes. Like he would do a lot of really uh, conversational, involved stuff with what Bill was playing to the point where it almost sounded like solos, sort of. Scott only played that way with Bill and that group because that group really kind of made it a thing where Scott's kind of known for playing in that soloistic way, but if you go listen to other records that he was on, he's not always doing that. And so he kind of knew that like this is the band where I can do this. This record I need to kind of just lay it down more straightforward and that's just what you got to do. So I always kind of take that into account that like for instance the Empyrean Sanctum record, I'm not doing a lot of flashy stuff on that. I'm not doing a lot of stuff where the bass has these lead melodies or these other contrapuntal things that are happening. I'm just kind of laying it down and playing more of a um support role because that's what that music kind of told me to do. So I am always thinking about serving the music first, not serving myself. That
R-
if I just want to play flashy, crazy stuff, I'm just going to like go put solos up online, whatever. But if I'm trying to be in a band, it's not about me. It's about everything. It's about the whole tune. It's about the combination of all of the musicians together. It's like, like when you're hanging out with people, you don't want to, in a group, you don't want to have one person be like kind of bogarting the whole conversation and just talking the whole time and blah, blah, blah. It's the same thing. You want it to be this sort of even conversation, even, you know, dispersal of ideas. And writing my bass parts, I'm always kind of thinking that I want to make bass lines that are melodically integral to the song, sort of like I was saying with Mike Dirnt and Roger and Matt from Branson earlier. I want to be doing that, but I also don't want to take away from the riffs itself. I don't want to take away from the rest of the music. I want to add my thing in there in a way that is still supporting everything else, but still has its own level of interest by itself. Like I remember there was one bass player I took a couple lessons with when I was in college, this great jazz bass player named Drew Gress. And I remember at one point he said something that, something kind of just really quickly, but it really left an impact on me. And he's like, yeah, when I am playing a bass line, I want to be able to take that bass line by itself. And even if it's just quarter notes, just like a typical jazz walking bass line, I want to be able to take that bass line by itself and have it be melodically interesting enough that you could listen to it by itself and it would still sound good. That there's still this kind of lyrical thing about it, even though it's only quarter notes and it's just a bass line, you still want it to be melodically saying something. You still want it to be just as singable as the melody line.
Yeah.
So I always am trying to approach my bass lines, regardless of if it's as fucked up as Evelyn or as more straightforward as Empyrean Sanctum, in that same kind of way.
Cool. And also, sort of like in the end, to sort of wrap things up, what's next for, of course, Revocation exists and all the other bands? I know you mentioned some of the stuff you're working on, some new stuff. Is just anything else you also like to plug in terms of like touring and stuff?
Well, I mean, Revocation, we're kind of just starting our touring cycle for the album because the album came out in the end of September. So we've only done one tour on that. We're going to Europe in a couple of weeks with Silosis, actually maybe more like a month. Um, with Silosis, we're doing that. We've got some other stuff happening next year, like we're playing some of the Euro festivals, which would be a lot of fun because those are always really cool. Um, that's happening. Exist is happening. I'm finishing up writing another album for Svengali. Like I said earlier, it's been a thing that is I've kind of gone on and off with because of the different amounts of other work that I have to do and being gone from touring a lot kind of can get you out of the mental space of writing in a way sometimes. But I'm wrapping up an album with that I should have out next year. I've got that new band Void Sector Zero with Christian Munzner, from
Yeah.
Obscura. That album's coming out next year. Um, and I can't remember anything else that's happening, but I'm sure it's going to just be
Yeah.
another thing. I've got another batch of tunes to do another jazz record because I put a jazz record out in 2018 and have been wanting to do another one over the last couple of years, but with just again, with the all the other stuff I have
Yeah.
going on all the time, it can be a challenge to.
Man, you're keeping busy.
Oh yeah, yeah, and,
Yeah.
and then on top of that, I'm building all the bases that I'm building. Like
Wow.
I've got 7 commissions that I'm building, and then I think 15 instruments in total. That like
Yeah.
my garage is just like full of stuff. So yeah,
Holy shit.
I've got a
Yeah.
lot of I've got a lot of stuff on my
Yeah.
plate.
Yeah. Do you
Sometimes a
ever
little
just
bit
have
of
want to have a moment where you're like, I just need to breathe?
yeah. I definitely well recently I've been experiencing that more because I've always been able to kind of push through that kind of thing. And I've never really found a physical ceiling of like my body telling me to like shut the fuck up and just stop. And over the last like year or two, I've kind of been experiencing that because I'm not old at all. I'm only 36, but like this is at the point in which your body kind of can start telling you like, hey, you can't really do that anymore.
Yeah,
Um,
you're like, okay.
and and so yeah, I've been having to listen to that a little bit more, but sometimes I'm stubborn and I just keep pushing through that. But yeah, it's I definitely have no shortage of things to get involved in.
Nice. But thanks,
Yeah.
man, for this conversation. Great to have you on my show. It's just any final words you want to say to the viewers that are watching this to close this out?
Yeah, I mean, for anybody that's checked any of my stuff out, supported me in any capacity, given me any kind words for really anything, appreciate it. And really definitely makes me feel good and makes it easier to continue doing what I'm doing. So I appreciate it.
Nice. So, everybody, Alex Weber,
Okay.
and we'll see you next time.